So I flew down there and I spent a week. I checked them out, and they were there, and they were beautiful. And I mean, there's nothing quite like a swift boat. And I saw them for the first time. They took me down to the piers, and I heard the engines, and there's nothing like the sound of the engines. And I started to get goosebumps. And I stepped at the top of the ladder to the pier, and there were the two boats sitting side by side with their engines turning over. And I swear to you, I was suddenly like 22 years old, back in Vietnam, and there were the swift boats. And we went out and played with them and had a great time with them, and then we arranged to have them brought up here because the Navy wanted to preserve the very first one that was made in the museum.
Okay, how long? You've been looking for one for longer than 7 years.
Oh, we've been looking for, Senator Kerry and I have been looking for Mark I swift boats for almost 10 years. And we kept running into dead ends. And the Navy the Navy kept telling me they weren't sure if they had any. So it was an incredible discovery to find them.
Where were they?
We're in Panama.
I know, but where were all the other ones?
Oh, the other ones were all left in country. They were given over to the Vietnamese, and I'd be very surprised if any of them are still in any operating condition. And I think there may have been some that went to Panama. I'm sorry, to the Philippines, and some went to Thailand. But I was just in Thailand. They don't have them anymore.
How many were over in Vietnam? Do you have?
There were about 100 total that were in Vietnam. I think there was approximately 107 or 108 that were built.
How did the boats get up here from Panama then?
We loaded them on LST, landing ship tank, the Lemoore County. They were loaded on her helo deck by a crane, and then they were brought up to Little Creek where they were put in dry storage until about 3 weeks ago when they were brought out. And the important thing to note is the crew members on board this boat, which I would encourage you to say something to, brought the boats, they're the ones that kept these boats in incredible condition. They had no special money for it. They scripted and they saved and did a lot of work on their own to keep these boats in good condition. It was a labor of love. And they're here, they came with the boats, and they're the ones that are operating them for us today.
So how did they get from, you all had an overnight trip? Can you tell about that? Or?
Oh yes, well we had the last river run. What happened is that we got them down to Little Creek, and I wanted to put together a group of 18 people, 9 former enlisted and 9 officers. Senator Kerry was among them, and Representative Colby from Arizona. That's K-E-R-R-Y from Massachusetts, not the K-E-R-R-E-Y from Nebraska. And those 2 guys, and 9 people on each boat, and we brought them up overnight from Little Creek. We stayed the night in Dahlgren, and then we came into Washington. And to watch the faces of all these guys in the boat as they had private moments. They'd go to a part of the boat and they'd sit down, and you just see them. You knew that their minds were going back 25 years. It's incredible to see this, to see these people go back in time, and the emotions that came up. Sometimes a little seasickness came up, but mostly it was just joy, great joy.
Was it?
Some of Senator Kerry's crew members were on board. One of my crew members was on board. He's here today. Harry Creamer is his name. But as far as who's here today, for the last 3 days, these boats have been available from 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so what you have are all the people who served the swift boats in Vietnam that we were able to get a hold of and get the word on, who are here with their families so they can see what their fathers did during the war, so they can have an opportunity to experience these boats again. We have folks coming from all over the country and literally all over the world. We have folks that flew in from Italy, from London, from Hawaii, which is almost a foreign country. That's where I was born. We have folks come from all across the states. We expect anywhere between 400 and 500 people to be here on Saturday morning. I only have fond memories about the boats. I don't have always fond memories about what happened on them or what we were involved in. But I think it's an experience. I will only speak for myself, but I think if you talk to other people, you'll find that anybody who served on these boats would never trade that experience for anything. I would go back and do it all again. And it doesn't have anything to do with politics. It doesn't have anything to do with loving war or wanting to be part of conflict and combat. It has to do with the special bond of love and dedication that came together in those most trying of circumstances. There is nothing like fear of life and safety and in the intensity of combat to draw people together. It's a bond that you carry with you all your life, and it's something that you cherish, and it's something that sustains you through hard times through the rest of your life. And
okay, what types of things did you all do on the boats over there?
Well, we did routine patrols. Our patrols were often hours of boredom, or routine, actually, never boredom. punctuated by moments and minutes of stark terror. We were subject to ambush from the banks of the rivers. We were subject to mines going up under the boats. We had difficulties from sappers, which were espionage people or carried bombs and things, and in other types of things, looking for enemy who were being smuggled in the boats. We also went ashore, made landings, swept villages. We primarily tried to avoid conflict whenever we could, but we were terrified. And most of the time, I think during when you were up a river, the fact that anything could happen at any moment was, I think every one of us lived with fear constantly. Some of us suffered from nightmares while we were there. Some of them were humorous nightmares. One fellow grabbed a hold of the feet of the guy sleeping behind him and thought they were the boat throttles and was saying, "Back down full, back down full," while he had a hold of this guy's stocking feet. It's some of them were not so pleasant, but it had just a deep impression that was made upon you. And some of it was fear, and some of it was joy. We also went into villages, and we also stopped boats from time to time. We'd see somebody that had a wound or had an infection or needed medical assistance. We provided medical assistance to some of the people that we stopped on the rivers. We tried to be good neighbors as much as we could, because we learned early on that the boats that were insensitive to the people that they were operating around got ambushed more than those that slowed down for the fishing boats and tried to develop relationships with the people in the villages.
What's your most vivid story that you remember?
I think that there's two vivid stories. The first vivid story would be stopping a boat that had a boy on board that had a horrible infection on his right hand. His right hand was swollen up the size of a grapefruit, and he was in horrible pain. It was probably a net cut or something that infected. Infections were very prevalent there, so I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured I couldn't do anything bad to what I was there, so I entered the wound with a scalpel, and it exploded, and we drained about 1.5 cups of pus and other corruption from his hand and got free flow bleeding. And then I did the best job I could to stitch it back up, filled it full of Batricin, and then tried to get it stitched back up. It was right in this part of the hand. And then I let him go, and I didn't know what was going to happen to him. And then I saw him about 4 weeks later on the river, and the swelling had gone down, and the stitches were healing, and I was able to take the stitches out. And the other vivid memories I have are firefights, and particularly the sounds of people's voices on the radio when they were screaming for medevacs and losing people and having people die. And all of us here on this boat lost friends. Some of us lost people on our own boats and lost crew members. I say lost because they're dead, but I don't think they're gone, because they live in our memories and they live in our hearts.
Okay, so comparing how you felt in Vietnam to today, how would you say it is?
Well, I've resolved the war in my mind. I think I got over the anger that I felt afterwards about the way the war was conducted, and I think some of us had feelings about that. It was a very confusing time when I came back to this country. The country was torn apart by protest, and there was a great deal of controversy over the war and the participation in it. I wasn't welcomed back. Most of us were not welcomed back. I think we've had slow healing processes over the years to resolve that in our minds. Most of us make peace with ourselves in our own private way. Some use religion, some use family, and some use combinations of all of that. How I feel about it now and how I feel about the experience is that I'm proud that I went. I'm blessed that I had an opportunity to meet the people that I served with. They're all brothers to me. I think we're all brothers in this bond. So I'm proud to be part of the family of Swiftboat folks. I don't think it gets any better than that. I think that this is something that will sustain me until the day I die. It'll help me continue to resolve what happened to me, because we'll be a strength for each other. We've always been a strength for each other.
Okay, one last question. How many people generally were on one of these boats, and can you kind of briefly describe what an average day was like? What you did?
Sure. There was a crew of 6. That was 1 officer and 5 enlisted. But those barriers got broken down really quickly, because you can't live in a situation like this where all your bodily functions are available for observation. The bathrooms never worked on these boats, so we used to have to use the back of the boat. So I mean, the idea of being an officer and being enlisted and having separate quarters and separate messing, all these things that were a traditional part of the military were gone and forgotten. And I say good riddance, by the way. I think those kinds of discriminators don't serve anybody or anything. So we were all drawn together, we're all the same. In fact, some of us even wore enlisted uniforms because they tried to make the officers wear khakis and the enlisted folks wear dungarees, and there were different prices on our heads. So generally we gave our crews the option of we were all going to be officers or we're all going to be enlisted. But also the uniform barriers broke down because pretty soon you were in shorts and tennis shoes and patrolling in what was comfortable. A typical day would start out very early in the morning with a briefing, an intelligence briefing, which would tell you where you were going to go in the area you were going to be involved in. If you were going out on a routine patrol, you would go out and relieve a boat that patrolled a certain section of river or a certain section of the coast. The patrols lasted about 24 hours. You carried your food and your drink on board, and you went out and did your patrol. You boarded, searched junks, and occasionally went on operations with different elements of the Army or the Air Force. These routine patrols, which lasted 24 hours, were punctuated by organized raids where you get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 boats, depending on the strength of enemy you thought you were going to encounter. And you would go out and hit them in the morning at dawn, come in fast and hot, sometimes returning fire, sometimes prepping fire, sometimes nothing happening, and sometimes walking into a storm. I mean, literally a storm, an intense experience of gunfire being returned and people screaming, and it lasts anywhere between 2 minutes and 10 minutes. And you get out and lick your wounds and hope that usually we prevailed. Swift boats always prevailed. You know, we lost good people though. We lost an awful lot of fine, good people, and we lost boats. So there was the routine patrols, and then there were the raids. Well, it's safer today. It's a lot safer. Well, I think that all through this experience I've dealt with flashbacks, and everybody wonders what flashbacks are. You don't really go someplace, you don't lose control or lose consciousness, but you have a sound like a certain type of helicopter, these engines, the certain smell of these boats, seeing the faces of the people that I knew 25 years ago. All of this brings it all back now. It makes it very real today, and sometimes that's a very emotional thing. Fortunately, I think for me, this is a joyous experience, so I feel no heaviness in my heart. There were times when I first got on these boats down in Panama and went back up in the jungles with them in that same humidity, that I had some difficult moments. Nothing that was uncontrollable, just very emotional. I mean, there are certain smells and certain noises that are associated with traumatic events. Some people call it post-traumatic stress disorder. We all have it in one form or another. If you've been in a serious automobile accident, or if you had something particularly traumatic happen to you in your life, you've experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. So there are good smells and there are bad smells. There's good sounds and there's bad sounds. So being here today has been great smells, great sounds, incredible friends, very emotional and loving and nurturing experience for me. It's been an incredible day. This whole week has been an amazing week. It's been a dream come true.
You know, about 25 years ago, going up the river. Can you tell me what you might have been feeling and smelling at that time?
Well, when you go up a river, you're on the sweetest drug known to man, which is adrenaline, and you've got a full dose of adrenaline, which means colors are 4 times more brilliant, sounds are crisper and louder, smells are much more enhanced. Your entire body is tuned to the moment, and you're only right where you are at the moment, and you're never a second behind or a second ahead. And the only part of your mind that is ahead is thinking of what's liable to be around the next bend. So you're fully engaged with the moment, and a certain amount of that is fear, and a certain amount of it's anticipation, and that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I mean, when you come out of something like that, that's when a lot of people learn what it was like to wet their pants. And the first time somebody shot at me, I wet my pants. I mean, I didn't even know I did it, you know, and it was quickly pointed out to me that I wet my pants by my crew, but we were almost hysterical. The first time I got shot at after we were finished, I was nearly hysterical with laughter. I was coming down off this incredible high. I had a wet pair of trousers, which were pointed out to me by my crew, and that's just a normal process. You can literally get things scared out of you. and it's just part of that process of combat. It only happened the first time. You know, after that, it never happened again. Thank goodness, because I was running out of clothing. But there is no other experience as intense, and a lot of people try to chase that the rest of their lives. A lot of us still like fast boats, fast cars, fast airplanes. We like thrills, and you get a taste of adrenaline, and you want more. And it's a hard thing to come down from.
The sailors that are operating these boats, what about them? They helping you guys out pretty good?
These guys have been absolutely tremendous, and if it wasn't for their support in this process, it never would have happened. And not only that, these are the guys that took care of these boats over the years. They've inherited different guys, but the same legacy, and they've kept these boats as almost a private project or a project within the Navy. They got no extra money for it. They got no extra funding. You know, money is tough right now, and it's difficult to find money even for historical things. I would hope that the Navy, and I would urge the Navy in my position with whatever little influence I have, is to make sure we do not lose sight of the importance of preserving our history, our tradition, and the legacy that makes up tradition and history. And this boat is part of that legacy and tradition. But these guys kept it alive. Every one of them kept this dream alive. They kept the seed of this dream alive so that it could come to pass, so this dream could come true.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add or say that we haven't talked about?
No, I'm just really excited to be here, and I want to make sure that everybody who watches this understands that I'm not responsible for this. You know, I got singled out for this interview, but I'm not the one that's responsible for this. The guys who took care of this boat are responsible for this. The officer in charge who wrote the letter that I saw that let me know that these boats needed to be saved is responsible for this. The director of the Historical Center who saw the value in this, the Navy who saw the value in this, the senior officers that made this happen, all the staff work, the guys within this organization, the boat drivers and their families that supported these guys over the years, they're the ones that are responsible. You know, I may have helped facilitate this a little bit, but if you can plant a seed, that's an easy thing to do. It's taking care of the plant after it grows that's the hard part. So there may be 2 or 3 gardeners, 2 or 3 people who sowed this seed, but there's a lot of gardeners, and they're all over this boat.